Good morning. The time is now 10 a.m. and I'm going to call this meeting of Committee of the Whole to order. Mayor Hackson is absent with notice. She's feeling under the weather and has generously offered to keep her germs to herself. We are also extending thanks to Councillor Foster, who's also joining us virtually. I guess it's the season for viral infections. So I extend best wishes to everybody for staying healthy during the season. And so like I said, I'm going to call these meeting to order. I'm on the rotation for acting mayor, so I'm going to chair our meetings today. I'm going to start to ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I will move to our land acknowledgement. And if you'll bear with me, I will just pull it up because I'm not used to having it up. We moved things around and didn't move enough stuff around. All right, thank you. The Town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaties, First Nations, and other Indigenous people. And on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as East Gwillimbury's closest First Nation community, and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of this land, and we join them in these responsibilities. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now we'll move to community announcements. Does anyone have any community announcements to make? Councillor Leahy, go ahead.
Thank you very much, through you. I would like to announce that a local builder has won a very prestigious award that celebrates sustainability and community and cutting-edge technology. It's the East Gwillimbury Discovery Home in the Village Green on Centre Street in Mount Albert, and they won the HERS H2O Award for conserving over 20% more water than traditionally built homes. So congratulations to Averton for that award.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I announced this last week, but it bears repeating. The library's giant used book sale is on October 18th and 19th. We're still looking for donations of books, so if you have any gently used books you'd like to donate, you can drop them off at either one of our libraries and come out on the 18th and 19th. Books are at the book sale are by donation, so you can stock up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I had one. There's a community and home assistance to seniors, CHATS, is hosting their second annual Amazing Adventure. The Amazing Adventure is happening on October 20th, and it's a car rally that takes you through Aurora, Newmarket, East Gwillimbury, and Georgina. Registration includes prizes, a breakfast, free dinner, and a day of fun while supporting CHATS. Wonderful and much needed organization doing good work in our communities, and you can find out more information on the CHATS website. Is that it for community announcements? I'll move to deputations. I don't see any here on our prepared agenda. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Through Madam Chair, that's correct. There are no prepared deputations.
All right, so then we're moving on to item F, which is presentations, and we have T. Hertel, Manager of Service Planning for York Region Transit, making a presentation regarding their 2025 transit initiatives within our town. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of Town Council, for having me back again this year to present to you our annual plan for next year. So I'm joined today by quite a few members of our staff, and some of them will be familiar faces to some members of Council by now. We have Aaron Strawn, who's our accessibility and fare specialist. Julius, who's our service planner for the area. He just started with YRT yesterday. And then we have a few members of our on-request team as well, including Kim Heath, who's the manager of the team. So they're here in support. So you let him out of the
office on his first day of work? On his second day of work?
Yeah.
Well, it's transit, right? Go ahead.
We're bringing him up here so he understands the lay of the land. So again, thank you for having me back here. Great to be back. If we can just jump to the next slide. Thank you. So a quick overview of what I'm going to be going over today. We'll start with the annual plan process, followed by a reminder of some of the 2024 initiatives that we have done this year in the town, followed by the stakeholder and public consultation program we went through for the 2025 annual plan, including a bunch of events afterwards as well. I'll follow that up with the plan that we've put together for next year as a result, a summary of some of our projects and programs that we also run at YRT in addition to our annual plan as they pertain to the town. Finally, before next steps, some ridership trends, specifically to the town of EG as well, which is always an interesting topic. So if we can jump to the next slide, please. Okay, so the annual plan process, it's a wheel because it's never ending. In fact, already now we're getting started on gathering initiatives for our 2026 annual plan as we close off our 2025 annual plan. Two key points I'll highlight at the bottom right corner is our stakeholder and public consultation program. That's what we did in the spring, including a number of events up here in town of EG as well. And right now we're in the process of presenting to local councils before in November taking the annual plan as part of our operating budget to the region's council for approval. Jump to the next slide, please. So 2024 focused, as you could see, focused on investments into Route 50. This was highlighted last year as well as what we're going to be doing this year. So the Route 50 is a frequent transit network. It's the longest route in our system. It continues to have fantastic ridership growth, which is why we continue to invest into it. This year we improved weekday rush hour as well as weekend holiday frequency on the Route 50. One other thing that's not on the slide that I will say that's important to note on the fare side of things, in February we achieved the One Fare program with the province, and that involved the whole GTA led by the province, and we work with the province and our counterparts to get fare integration completed between YRT and the TTC, which was the one piece of missing fare integration that YRT had. Another important thing to note for the town would be that program also brought about fare integration between GO Transit and the TTC. So if you now take the GO train down to Toronto, you get on the TTC after, it's a free ride for the customer. Next slide, please. Okay, so public and stakeholder consultations in the town this year, based on feedback that we received, including on this council floor last year, we made sure to get out to more events in person, and we specifically hit 2 in each town. For the town of EG, those events were at the Ross Family Complex, as well as our Family Fun Day that the region puts on at 90 Bales Drive every year. We also met with town staff back in April, had great discussions about development, including the HELP, which took up probably about half the meeting, but great discussions on that. And we also, highlighted in the black box, received a lot of great feedback last year for rebranding the on-request service, including on this council floor specifically. If we jump to the next slide, please. So I'll start with mentioning the piece in the black box there. Following our consultations in the spring, we met with town staff a few times, and through the help of Rhonda Wilson and others in the town, we managed to engage with a number of other groups in the town just very recently on our services, including most notably our on-request services. So that included having the Mount Albert engagement event on September 17th. We presented to the Youth Advisory Committee on September 25th. And on October 1st, we attended the Health and Wellness Fair as well. And coming out of these events, there's a few more events that we're working on attending, including transit orientations that Erin is working on at the request of members and attendees of those events as well. So that's coming up. At these events, staff also had the opportunity to show the new app, the YRT On Request app, to participants, which was great. But nevertheless, the feedback that we heard is shown up on the slide there. There's a request for Route 50 to connect to East Gwillimbury GO Station again. There's requests for increased service options in late evenings and Sundays. There was requests for connections to the HELP, which is opening next year. And there's requests for expansion and increased marketing of our on-request services, which play a huge role in the town here. If you jump to the next slide. So our plan for next year, I mentioned the Route 50. Again, every year we invest into it. Next year, the investment is specifically a connection to the HELP as that facility opens up in mid-next year. The on-request North Central is something that, so as our on-request services grow, we continue to amalgamate and expand service areas and service hours. We already have extended late evening Saturday service. Some of these improvements we're already able to do this year based on need as well as feedback and the growth in our technology and capacity. So Sunday service was introduced as part of On-Request North in the northern part of East Gwillimbury. Late evening Saturday service was extended in Mount Albert. We have more good expansions coming for On-Request, including Sunday service for the town as a whole, as well as expanded hours in the northern part of East Gwillimbury. A lot of convoluted different service offerings, but all in all, more service for members and residents of the town. And we also have met with, in the black box shown there, we've got our eyes on the new logistics and distribution center for Loblaws coming up that is also covered by On-Request North Central. We jump to the next slide. So the next couple slides I'll go through quickly. It's just map slides that show visually the growth of transit in East Gwillimbury. So if we jump to the next slide, highlighted in blue is the Route 50, which we improved this year frequency on. And if we jump to the next slide, the whole town is essentially highlighted in blue because what that means is on-request service come next year, the latest for the whole town, as well as more investments into the Route 50. If we jump to the next slide. So projects and programs. When it comes to planning for the future, we continue to invest in the frequent transit network. The Route 50 is included as part of that. Fare and service integration, I mentioned the one fare. We are building on the success and the momentum of that with the province and looking at how do we integrate services when it comes to specialized transit, as well as looking at ability to pay on the fare side. Technology and innovation, last year I mentioned the electrification program. We continue on that, up to 180 e-buses procured by 2028. And with that, we continue to expand our facilities to be able to take these buses and charge them. Right now, our 14 buses run exclusively out of the Newmarket terminal. We're going to be expanding further. And we're putting in a charge management system as well that's going to allow these buses to go further and optimize our use of them better as well. Finally, on the customer service side, we continue to offer our award-winning travel training program, some of which various groups in town have already had the benefit of hearing, and more is coming as we work through that as well. If we jump to the next slide. So system ridership. The key message here is we've put the pandemic behind us. We have not leveled off in terms of our ridership growth to pre-pandemic levels. We continue to grow at higher levels than pre-pandemic. The town is no different. Ridership in the town, year-to-date 2024 compared to year-to-date 2023, grew 30%, which is great news. A lot of that is driven by ridership growth on the Route 50. We continue to monitor that. We continue to use it as advocacy for more service hour growth. And finally, the last slide, please. Next steps, I mentioned that we'll be going to Region Council to get approval of our operating and capital budget. The annual plan piece is going to be included in there. We will then polish off our annual plan document, put it up online for everyone to see, residents and everyone. And as I mentioned, we've already began putting together the annual plan for 2026 with some of our service initiatives, which will be coming out again in the spring to the town to consult with. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hertel. Before we move on to questions, can I have a motion to receive the presentation moved by Councillor Carruthers? So, members of committee, questions. Go ahead, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, and I appreciate you coming out to our youth committee. They were blown away by the on-demand. There was a lot of questions about how it works, but once they figured it out, they were really blown away by it. I think the questions about how it works was that they couldn't believe that it was that easy and that cheap to go wherever they wanted within EG. One of the comments that came up there was about how in East Gwillimbury, a lot of us have doctors and dentists and medical appointments in Newmarket. And so I know that you can get a ride to a route and then transfer, but it would be very nice, especially for our seniors, if there was a way to use on-demand just to go to the hospital where they have tests, where there's medical offices around there. So to expand to that would be huge for our seniors in East Gwillimbury. Unlike other municipalities, we just don't have those services up here. And I also wanted to just mention about when you get to promoting this to residents, having a video that's very easy to share would be really helpful. Because when we walked through the process, it was so much easier than the slides suggested. So if you have someone who's walking through that. And also in your consultations, I didn't see anything in Ward 1, which is Holland Landing. Would love to have you out there to talk with residents. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Crone, did you have your hand up?
Sure.
I thought you did. And then Councillor Leahy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our presenter. Appreciate you coming out to talk with us today, and I do appreciate the outreach you've done with the community. I know you came out to Ward 3 and gave a little chat. Unfortunately, we didn't have a bigger crowd for you, but we had a hearty group of people that showed up. So I'll throw my support, through you, Madam Chair, to our presenter. I'll throw my support to all the feedback that you received about improvements. I support them, and I think my colleague here made an excellent point on assisting seniors. That's a big, I know I've talked to folks in the Royal Oak Seniors apartments. They really love this service. If we can expand it to help them even more so, that would be appreciated. I was hoping, could you just restate again, because I think it's an important point, why you thought the ridership was up 30% last year or this year?
Why?
Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair. It's a good question. I don't know. Did I say an answer? I don't know if I did. I really don't know why. So I can say what is driving ridership growth for the most part, and it's discretionary trips. So the commuters have not come back the way they have pre-pandemic, as we know. A lot of offices downtown are still 50%. York Region staff is at 50%. But what has driven our ridership growth is discretionary trips, so trips that people make outside of commuting. If I can speak outside of town specifically, I know down in Vaughan, ridership growth around Wonderland has just ballooned, for example. So that could be the reason up here is discretionary trips, non-commuting trips. Also, major industrial areas as well.
Okay.
We've seen ridership growth around there, and these comments are for the region as a whole, and I think the transit industry as well is concurring on this trend.
Okay, thank you for that. And if I may, I've downloaded the app to my phone. It's very much like an Uber app. It's very impressive. Where, I think about growing up as a kid, what you would offer someone in the country to be picked up and taken to another point in the country is phenomenal. Like, I never would have dreamt that would have ever come to East Gwillimbury. So I am grateful for that. I just, I know it's expensive to operate the vehicles. At what point, do you have a formula where your on request hits a certain point where you go, okay, I think we need to put in a bus service? Does such a thing exist? And can you share?
Madam Chair, we're developing that. So right at the moment, we have our on-request contractor working on our on-request plan. And a big part of that plan is to set this guidance for when we upgrade to fixed route services or when we backtrack as well, setting those thresholds. So when that plan is finished, come I think early next year is probably what we're looking for. We'll be able to use that guidance to make those decisions.
Okay, all right, I look forward to it. Through you, Madam Chair, just one last time, one last question. I would be remiss if I didn't honor the wishes of my residents to put in another plug to reinstate the 404 Plaza
Right.
as an on-request route. I know we had a great deal of concern about that. I know it's achievable through on request to the line 50, but it adds extra time. So I'm asking, every time you see me, I'm going to ask it. So just, you've been warned. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crone. Go ahead, Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank you, as my fellow councillor has, for coming out in person to Ward 3 a few weeks ago and presenting to us. I learned a tremendous amount from that presentation, and I know that every single individual resident who came out received personal attention from you and customized support in terms of understanding the routes and planning their specific routes that they need in their lives. So I really appreciate that. And you help me do my job advocating for the public when we have such strong relationships and strong communications. So one of the things that I learned about that I'd like to ask you to speak more about so that the rest of the public can be aware of it is a program that you have where you actually train people and you physically accompany them on their routes. So whether it be young people or seniors or those with accessibility challenges or anyone who is unfamiliar with the process and unfamiliar with the routes that they'd like to take, you will actually send someone out to teach them how to take that route. And I think this is an incredible service that I'd like to give you the opportunity to share with the public more about.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I think what I might do is see if anyone from the YRT team, Aaron, or someone would like to come speak about the travel training in a bit more detail than I can. If I may.
Yes, of course.
Okay. I can do it. Yeah? Okay.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Kim Heathcote, I'm the manager of YRT on Request and the paratransit service and the 65-plus service that we also have across the entire region, which is strictly for seniors 65 and over. We do have a travel training program at York Region. It's a My Ride program and a travel training program. So we actually train our paratransit riders on how to utilize the conventional, fully accessible, fixed service for a portion of their trip. So we travel train them for that. We have a My Ride program where we go out to schools and day programs, and we'll give information about our service. And we even have had a bus come out and we'll teach children with autism how to get on the bus and give them information about that. As well, we have a transitability coordinator who will actually come and teach anybody how to utilize any route that they want in the region. So she has come up to East Gwillimbury. There was a mother here who had a son going to university in Toronto. We came up and assisted them and showed how he would get right down to the university in Toronto. So that is something that we do, and we're very proud of that. I think a lot of people, when it comes to transit, it's not a question of I can't do it, it's I don't know how to do it. So when we open up that door, it just makes a huge difference.
Thank you for that. Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Kim. And it's nice that we're on a first-name basis.
Yeah.
And so whenever anybody asks me questions, I have confidence that when I send them directly to you, that you
Yes.
will follow up and give them the attention that they need.
Yes, thank you.
So-
Tomas was telling me, why are you talking to Scott and Susan? I'm like, I didn't know any different, but yes, we're happy to help, always.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I guess a lot of people, it's not so much can I, but that there's an element of intimidation because the network is so large and the region that you're serving is so big and our community is so widespread. So are there any other questions from members of committee? I had a couple myself, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity. Again, I'm going to echo the thought that, you know, the amount of outreach and the training and the marketing that you need to do is only going to help with increasing that ridership. I think it's possible that you're not seeing commuter traffic simply because those options, such as servicing our GO station, aren't there. And so if I were to be commuting downtown, it wouldn't be possible for me to get to the GO station. So, and I can ride my bike to the GO station. So from that perspective, it's a bit challenging. I did want to kind of touch a little bit on the Health and Active Living Plaza and the service in Queensville. So right now, if someone gets off the bus at Jim Mortson and they're heading northbound, so they've come up from Newmarket, they're heading northbound, they have to get off on the gravel shoulder and cross Leslie Street. Would it be possible for the Route 50 to enter into the subdivision and use the loop on Jim Mortson? It's literally a half circle, and that will be the location of our Health and Active Living Plaza. That puts you right into the heart of the community, within walking distance of 2 new schools and a huge park. So I'm wondering if that is something that you could consider, rather than trying to get signalized intersections in place in the next 2 years. Why not make this a safer option now, rather than next year? I'm putting that one out there. I don't know if you've considered it.
We heard the same feedback from staff. So we are looking at the diversion into it, and the cost benefit of it, really from the perspective of the community. Because while it would greatly benefit those that are going to the help and the community there as well. The other thing we have to consider is a number of people on the bus that are bypassing it, and how much extra time does that add to their trip. But we are looking at it because we did hear it from staff. At least there will be a bus stop at a signalized intersection there with a pedestrian connection, I noticed there. But we're looking at the diversion, and we'll land on that before the facility opens.
Well, it sounds like we're aligned then with our staff, which is
Yes.
good. The other question I had for you was that sort of east-west connection, that people, there's a tremendous number of people who live in Holland Landing who won't be able to easily get to the Health and Active Living Plaza, and the same thing with Mount Albert. I realize that, you know, in other communities there's a network, but in this case we have basically got one line that's serving that spine and no east-west connection. Is there some opportunity to look at that even for evening service after school, you know, during programming at our community center?
So I'll go back to, I guess, the benefits of the on request. So by the time the HALP opens, if I may say, Kim, all of East Gwillimbury will have transit access and a connection to the HALP 7 days a week, is what we're looking for. And that includes Mount Albert and Holland Landing through the on-request service. It is probably unlikely that when coming from the east and the west to the HALP, that the passenger is going to get put onto the Route 50 to take them to the HALP. They'll most likely get a direct trip right to the front doors of the HALP coming from the east and the west, because there's no fixed transit route that's available for them.
Okay.
So for me, I may personally prefer that kind of service instead of a fixed route bus that may be running on a frequency of 45 minutes or whatever we might be able to afford, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I did also want to commend you on the fare integration piece. I have 2 teenagers whose Presto cards get tapped twice, and so they prefer to tap once, especially when you've got that kind of service. It's a huge thing where they can go at the GO station and then be on TTC or somewhere in Markham using the same fare. And so I once they've accessed the network, that's incredible. If you think about the places that people can go using that one tap. So I commend you and the team for doing that. That's that's a huge project that you've accomplished. Thank you.
If I may just address your first point about access to the GO station.
Yeah.
So again, that is possible through the on request service. It's called Mount Albert. It's called Mount Albert Holland Landing, but it does capture Sharon in between it as well. So there is access to the East Gwillimbury GO station through on request.
I think
Direct
that's
trip.
that was the feedback I gave you last time, was don't call it Holland Landing in Mount Albert,
Yes.
call it East Gwillimbury. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
I've got a motion from Councillor Carruthers. Is there any other questions before I move on? All right, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much once again for being here today. So the next item we have is Parks, Rec and Culture with Councillor Crone in the chair, and we're talking about YRT and the Health and Active Living Plaza. So you might want to stay for a little bit. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one item on the agenda today. It's Parks and Recreation and Culture Report on York Region Transit and Health and Active Living Plaza. Could I have a mover? Councillor Leahy. Thank you. Mr. Karmazin, do you have, would you like to tell us a bit about this memo?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Town staff work closely with our partners with YRT as we grow to provide expanded access to municipal facilities and community amenities. At the request of Council and our Youth Advisory Committee of Council, town staff have formally reached out to YRT to request a dedicated bus route from each of our communities to the Health and Active Living Plaza. Staff would like to thank YRT for providing a service delivery update today, and staff will continue to work with our partners at YRT to continue to inform them of community needs and requests related to service delivery as we grow over time. Be happy to answer any questions related to the memo.
Thank you, Mr. Karmazin. Do we have any questions from committee? Councillor Carruthers.
No, to question, just appreciation. The Youth Committee is one of the first things that they addressed as a need, and I just really appreciate staff responding so thoroughly and taking the time to meet with YRT on this issue. I'll make sure I share this back to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I think from if I may ask maybe more of a comment, but the reason I asked the question about the formula based on hitting a critical mass of on request and then switching over to a bus, I think once help is up and running, I think the demand is going to be tremendous, and I think we will see the need for a regular bus service. When that comes, I don't know, but I think that will happen. I marvel, though, at the logistics involved in the on-request service. I think Uber might be upset with you guys that you offer, to go from, and I say to York Region Transit, to $4.40 for a trip. That's Uber would be very upset. They couldn't do it at that. But unless there's no further questions for Mr. Karmazin, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And we're carried. Mr. Karmazin, do you have any other items for members of committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Members of committee have anything for Mr. Karmazin? Seeing none, I will pass it back to you, Madam Chair.
And I'm going to throw it to Councillor Carruthers for Corporate Services.
Thank you very much. We have two items today. The first one is a sole source software licensing agreement, and I'll hand that over to General Manager Gandhi to take us through that.
Through you, Madam Chair. So this agreement is seeking council to authorize the town to enter to a small government enterprise agreement with Environmental Systems Research Institute, otherwise known as Esri. So this totals a cost of $155,702. And this will actually result in cost savings versus a year by year approach. So if there are any questions, we have our IT director, Rob Helko, here, and he can answer any specific questions to the agreement.
Thank you. It seems pretty straightforward. If I can just get someone to move the three recommendations, and then we can ask for questions. And the three recommendations are that the report be received, that council authorize the town to enter into the agreement for a 3-year term with a total cost of $155,702, and that the general manager of corporate services be authorized to execute the necessary agreements and documents. Can I get someone to move that? Councillor Crone, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to our second and last item, this is the report coming back after the EAC report that we had, and council had asked staff to respond to that. So I will turn that over to General Manager Gandhi as well.
Through you, Madam Chair. So this report speaks to the EAC report that was presented to Council earlier this year, and it outlines responses in terms of the initiatives that we have in place that stem from our environmental strategy. We have with us Chris Ross, who is our Manager of Environmental Initiatives, able to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. If I can get someone to move the resolution to receive this report. Councillor Johns, any questions on this? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. I have more of a comment than a question, but I would like to acknowledge appreciation from the Environmental Advisory Committee that they took consideration of the question that I asked when we were discussing a previous report regarding heat pumps. And I had asked if there were any studies that had been done to show the efficiency of them and maintenance and viability and cost, etc. So I was pleased to see that they had responded and that they are going to proceed now with looking into a workshop on heat pumps. Is that correct?
So just to clarify, this report is coming from Chris Ross, not the Environment Committee. So it is Chris who has responded with that information that you had asked for.
Yes, and so thank you for responding to the, I asked a general question about heat pumps. So is that correct that you're going to be, can you tell us a little bit more about the workshop on heat pumps?
It's through you, Madam Chair. It's interesting because after the report was presented, the EAC report was presented, I got contact with Enbridge, and there are 2 workshops that might be happening. The one for sure is happening on November 7th, so everybody, like, it's not in the report because the date was just confirmed last Friday. So this specific workshop is for residents, and of course, council is invited to attend, but it's a home energy retrofit offer that is delivered by Humber College. And it's about energy efficiencies at homes and retrofits. It's not specifically to heat pumps. It's more to retrofits at home, like improving insulation, improving windows, like and everything that is a building envelope. The second workshop is not confirmed, but is the workshop that was organized last year by the Environmental Advisory Committee about an education session for heat pumps specifically. And we are reviewing, I am helping and organizing with EAC that workshop to happen. So it probably be 2 workshops, one specifically for home retrofits and another one just for heat pumps.
Thank you, and if I may, through you, Madam Chair, that's very helpful information. I look forward to those workshops. I think that it's important for our residents to have all of the options at hand, and for councillors to be well informed so that we can make informed decisions on these options for the future of East Gwillimbury. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I want to thank you for this report. It was very informative, and I really enjoyed the part where we're looking at our corporate emissions, because it's one thing to tell our residents, here are some options that you can do, but when it comes to the climate crisis, municipalities are at the forefront. There is so much that we can be doing, and seeing that most of our emissions are coming from buildings and coming from natural gas that we're using in our buildings, I think should be a huge flag for us to look at what we can do in those areas. So I appreciate the report looking at that. And then when it looks at community emissions, it's gasoline, right? So it's that transit option. So helping to promote what YRT is trying to do is also so important. So when we know where the issues are, it's easier for us to find solutions to try and address them. So I appreciate that, and the work going into these community workshops, especially when we've identified that it's the adoption rate for heat pumps is low due to lack of accessible information. So I thought that was the piece I highlighted in there, that there's something that we can do. We can provide that information, and that's what you're going to do, and I really appreciate that. So if we can get communications to really support the November 7th workshop, get that out there so that the community is aware of it and get a good turnout, that would be amazing. So with no other questions, I'll call the vote to receive the report. All in favor? And that's carried. And we have nothing else under corporate services, nothing else from General Manager Gandhi.
Through you, Madam Chair, no, we don't have anything else. Thank
Okay,
you.
any other questions from council? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. We're on to item I, which is Development Services with myself in the chair. We have one prepared item on our agenda. It's taking up the bulk of our page count in our agenda, and that is Planning Branch Report DS 24-25, the adoption of the Sharon Heritage Conservation District Study. We've had this before us before, but I'll turn it to you, Ms. Bégin, to present your report to us.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. As noted, the committee has seen, substantively seen this report previously. When it came forward, we were directed to engage in some additional public consultation, which happened, and we have our manager of planning here today can then speak more specifically to the technical aspects of this report, but just wanted to note that through the process of the additional public consultation, we identified some themes that are perhaps that are important to residents, but maybe not directly related to the Heritage Conservation District, specifically around the changing neighborhood, streetscaping, street revitalization, issues like that. So we will certainly have conversations about what we can do on an interim basis to address some of those things. But I think for the purposes of today's discussion, it's really about making a decision on moving forward to the next phase, the planning phase of the Heritage Conservation District. So I'll maybe invite Manager Victoria Moore to speak to the report.
Welcome. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Through you, Madam Chair. So this report is largely the same as the report that was before committee earlier this summer. Before we were asked to do some additional public consultation. So that consultation was done. We had two drop-in style information sessions. I think we had about 12 to 15 residents who came out to those sessions. It was sort of an invite only for those who are directly impacted by the district study. So out of that, there were some concerns and questions, I think, that were addressed. There's also some outstanding questions, as mentioned, that aren't directly related to the HCD that can be explored kind of concurrently. And really, there seemed to be a bit of an interest and focus on improving the streetscape, sort of a revitalization efforts along Leslie Street that may go a long way in, I guess, giving the residents the certainty that proceeding with the HCD is the appropriate next step. So this report is back before you with some of that additional context, and also just to note that our consulting team is reviewing the comments and feedback that were received through those sessions, and that will inform part of any future work if we proceed to phase 2 of the project. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. I will use the analogy that it's been a bit of a marathon, because I understand that you have completed your first marathon just recently, so congratulations. Members of committee, any questions or comments before we move? I haven't got a motion, so maybe we'll put that on the table. Does anyone want to make a motion to move this forward? Councillor Carruthers, thank you. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. So I personally met with the consultant twice, and we had very lengthy, in-depth conversations. And so I wanted to just speak to a statement that was made about that the people who were invited to those public information sessions most recently were those who were most directly impacted. I think it's important to state that all of EG is impacted by the decisions that we make regarding heritage. And even if they don't live in Sharon, the Heritage Conservation District study is relevant to everyone, and everyone has the ability to contribute to it as it's evolving. And so I have one specific question with regard to, it's on page 97 of the lengthy report, and it's with regard to the recommendation of option 3. And it speaks to the, there's some sort of formula that they are talking about. They state that 42.4% of properties in the area meet at least 2 of the criteria, and that 27.3% of the properties in that option 3 that they recommend meet at least 1 criteria. So could you speak for the benefit of the public and explain a little bit more about this percentage formula and the criteria that are being considered?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the Ontario Heritage Act, in order for an area to qualify as or be eligible to become a heritage conservation district, 25% of the properties must meet a minimum of 2 criteria listed in the regulation. So the statement in the study is just confirming that 42.4% of the properties meet at least 1 criteria, so it's well above the minimum 25%. And then just for a point of interest, is that 27.3 also meet at least 1 criteria, showing that there is some historic value associated with those properties, although it doesn't meet the eligibility criteria.
Ms. Bégin, did you have something that you wanted to add? I see your finger hovering on your microphone.
Just for context, I think it's important to note that an HCD is a tool that provides sort of a blanket approach to a neighborhood or a portion of the community. And so it stands to reason that you'd want to make sure that you have a significant percentage of heritage value within that area to make the HCD make sense. So I think that's at a high level what the numbers are speaking to, saying that that in accordance with the regulations and what is deemed to be significant from a heritage perspective, there is enough heritage content in this area to warrant an HCD should that be the direction that council decides to move in.
So it's more than just how it feels, it's actually quantifying
Absolutely.
what would justify putting one of these in place. Thank you, staff.
Yeah, thank you very much for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments? I attended those meetings, and I wanted to say thank you to you and to the team for being there and listening and being open to some of the feedback. I think it would be helpful for me as one of the elected representatives is the comments about the downtown streetscape and the revitalization could have been helped if we had at hand some of the work that's been done in advance with the through the engineering department that shows the cross sections and the options with the hanging baskets and so on that are really just waiting for the region to say that they have to update Leslie Street. And so when that happens, we're ready. I think as part of this next step, if we can integrate some of that work that's already been done, maybe even some of the information that we have about the civic precinct. I think when you bring it together as a whole, it's not just about this is what we're going to impose on the residents, but rather as a partnership, we are investing as well and wanting to make sure that they're feeling supported in wanting to maintain and update and appreciate their properties. So I think from that perspective, I think it would be helpful if we had some of that, if we're doing those meetings, to have some of the boards there, not to say that we're doing it and it's happening and it's going to be next year, but to give people some reassurance that it's already been thought of. Councillor Foster, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to kind of, I guess, lend some support to where we are on behalf of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I often say that I like to keep things simple, and I guess to simplify this even more, and not to simplify it too much for the benefit of our consultants that have done a lot of hard work so far. But really, this first phase has just given us that information that both yourself and Councillor Leahy spoke about. And really moving to phase 2 is going to be the part that kind of gives us the meat and potatoes of the whole Heritage Conservation District. And, if we can manage and guide some change, I think the report uses that phrase for appropriate growth. I think that's the way we need to go. And again, this doesn't mean that we're moving ahead with the Heritage Conservation District yet. We're just moving to the next phase. I think everybody understands that. One other thing that I wanted to mention was in attending those consultation meetings, there were a couple of residents that indicated that they actually possessed a bunch of information about the history of Sharon and maybe the history of East Gwillimbury altogether. And I would just like to encourage those people, rather than come in at the last minute kind of thing and say, hey, I have this, I have that. I'd like to encourage them to make that information available to us here at the town. I think we could always strengthen the information we have. So I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I would really love some of those people to step forward and say, I have a host of information that may help you make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I see staff are furiously making notes, so I appreciate your comments. Anything else? All right, so we have a motion on the table from Councillor Carruthers as presented. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Bégin, did you have anything further to bring up under this area?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further at this time.
Members of committee, anything to raise? Seeing none, I'll move us on to item J1, which is Engineering and Public Works, with Councillor Leahy in the chair. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. We have one item on the agenda today, and it is the Engineering and Public Works memo, Town of East Gwillimbury Automated Speed Enforcement Program. And can I have a mover for this, please? Thank you, Councillor Crone. General Manager Molinari, would you like to speak to this memorandum?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So staff have completed some research on automated speed enforcement and have prepared a program framework for discussion with Council for a potential pilot. The intent of the ASE program is to reduce speeds on town roads and school zones and thus improve safety for area residents and motorists. So true success for the project would be to eliminate speeding in the community safety zones and actually not issue any tickets. So, but being realistic and as an initial goal, we'd be happy if the, once the program was implemented, if we could reduce the 85th percentile speeds to less than approximately 10 kilometers over the limit. So at present, the program costs are expected to be fully recovered by revenues, with surplus revenue being used to fund ongoing safety initiatives or potentially as directed by Council. So in a nutshell, what we're proposing is a 2-year pilot at 2 locations to assess the long-term costs and benefits of the program. And we would need to partner with the town of Newmark to provide support for ticket processing and for any potential hearing services that we may need for residents that wish to fight the tickets. So staff are proposing just to incorporate any feedback from Council today, and we'd return with a program for implementation, including a fairly robust communications plan. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, General Manager Molinari. Are there any questions from members of committee? Yes, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. How will this be publicized to residents? I think some of the feedback that we've received is that they weren't aware of it. Will there be signs posted identifying it?
Through you, Madam Chair. So yeah, this is just our initial discussion with Council. So as part of our plan that we would come back to Council with, there'd be a robust communications plan that'd be associated with that in order to make sure that the public is well informed of what we're doing. And we're actually not the first to do this. So, Newmarket's paved the way on this already. So we would kind of follow some of the same steps that they've used and make sure that the community is well informed of what we're moving forward with.
Thank you. I think one of the other pushbacks we get from the community is the 1 kilometer over. And so I see in the list of fines, 1 kilometer to 19 kilometers per hour over, there's a $5 per kilometer plus a $10 surcharge, so it would be a $15 ticket for going 1 over. I know that we can't start it at 5, because then you might as well just increase the speed to 5 more. But I'm wondering if there's some way to reassure residents that we're not going after $15 tickets. There's probably more administrative cost to issuing a $15 ticket than there is any sort of revenue. So I just I'm wondering what we can say to residents to help alleviate that concern that we're going to be ticketing everyone going 1 over, because there's going to be some massive tax grab to do that. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. We've actually talked about that same issue, and you know, part of the program is to change behaviors. It's not to annoy the public. So, you know, a ticket at 1 or 2 kilometers over the limit would not be well received, and that's not the intent of what we're trying to do. Those people, you know, we all go 1 or 2 kilometers over without even realizing it. So the intent is, and we don't want to say what the thresholds are, but the intent is, if you're significantly exceeding the speed limit, you will get a ticket in those zones. And I think if we set those limits at a reasonable level, those people who do get them will want to slow down. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking. The intent is not to do 1 or 2 kilometers over the limit.
Thank you. I think that will be reassuring to residents. Your comment about changing behavior, I think it is the big piece in this, that if I got a ticket for doing 1 over, I don't think it would change my behavior. It would just be annoying. So knowing what our intention is, I think is a big piece of this. So thank you for this.
Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I would just add through you to both Mr. Molinari and to my colleagues. I think the way I would explain this is just, it's really no different than, you don't get a 1 kilometer speeding ticket from a police officer because it's impractical. And I think the intent, as you're saying, Mr. Molinari, is to change behaviors. And we're after the worst offenders, and there's a lot of them. I know from my experience in the last 6 years on council, that this is a chronic problem that we have in our town. It's probably the #1 complaint that we get from residents about speeding on their streets, and I am fully supportive of anything that we can do to curb speeding. It's all about community safety. And I am so glad to see this coming forward. From all the research I've seen, not just in Ontario, but around the globe, this has the desired effect we want. So I'm really glad to see this coming forward, and I commend you for sticking with it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I see Councillor Foster has his hand raised there. Councillor Foster, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess comments more than anything, and I know that Councillor Johns has raised some concerns about this, and I quite agree. And although I agree about community safety and the community safety zones and all the stuff that goes along with that, we certainly have to pay attention to. But I agree with the thresholds issues about where you start to send a fine out and where you don't. And the things that come to mind to me is, if we are forcing people to constantly watch their speedometer, we're actually encouraging them to perform distracted driving. And that is a bit of an issue. I also wonder about the parts where, how many people will we have that we will have that are afraid to travel 62 in a 50. So in other words, they will now try to travel 52 in a 60, and driving too slow is also a chargeable offense. I think that we're walking a fine line, so there's a lot of work to do with this one. I wonder, has YRP been consulted with the other municipalities, not just ours? I would be interested to hear what they have to say about it. And one question that was kind of thrown to me from a police officer that I know, I understand there might be some questions about how you calibrate the equipment. So where I go with that is if we're going to charge somebody with doing 53 and a 50, if the machine hasn't been calibrated correctly or hasn't been calibrated often enough, is that a question if somebody wants to push us? So I think there's a lot of work to do. And again, I think this is something we have to do. I'm just not sure how we put this one forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I'm going to give our General Manager Molinari an opportunity to answer your question about whether YRP has been consulted during this process. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. So YRP, we discuss traffic matters with YRP on a regular basis. So they will be part of the discussions about this particular report when we bring it back. We have had some initial conversations with them to date. And, you know, in terms of calibration of equipment and so forth, we would be renting this equipment from a supplier, and that supplier would be responsible to ensure that the equipment's calibrated to meet at the appropriate times to make sure that it's functioning and that those tickets that are being generated are based on good functioning equipment that is providing us with the proper results. So the pilot is just that. It's a pilot whereby we will be trying a number of different things. We'll probably learn a few things along the way. We may not get it right on day one, but over the course of the pilot, we will certainly be a lot smarter in 2 years from now than we are right now. And that permanent program will have the benefits of all the learnings that we have through the pilot if council wishes to continue this on a permanent basis.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from, yes, thank you. Councillor Roy DeClementi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Molinari, your report noted one location. I think your verbal comments noted two. I'm also noting that in the report it says that three of our 8 community safety zones have 85th percentile at above 10 kilometers an hour. So my suggestion might be that we look at those 3 locations and whenever we're addressing questions about whether we need to step up enforcement or what have you, the 85th percentile is the number that we're always kind of touting as there's a problem if something is showing the 85th percentile. So for me, I would look at those 3 locations. We don't need to necessarily know which ones those are at this point, but I think having 3 gives you a good sense of what's happening with a pilot project, and it addresses the 3 most pressing concerned areas. My question for you is the Appendix 2 notes the summary of fines. Those are set by the province. We can't change those?
Through you, Madam Chair, those are the set fines that are associated with these. I don't believe that we may be able to, but I think it would be in our best interest to keep them at the same levels that the province has set. There are some additional costs that go along with those. There's a victim surcharge and MTO search fee and some other things that go into that. And then, you know, we've got our processing fees that we would be having to pay for the town of Newmarket, et cetera. So there's a few minuses in that, but essentially, as an example, a 20-kilometer over the limit would probably be somewhere in the area of about $160 fine. So just for some context.
Right, and that actually isn't crazy if you think about somebody traveling 70 kilometers an hour in a 50 zone. That's,
or a 40 zone.
Precisely. So as far as the revenue that would be generated from this program, I think it's not just enough to sort of talk to residents and say that, you know, we're trying to address this and that we really want safe outcomes for our community. I think it would be helpful if we were able to convey what that money was going towards. So if we said, oh, it's just going towards community safety, that's a challenge. But if we were to say the money that we're collecting, we're putting towards more safer pedestrian walkways, more multi-use pathways, more trails, into active transportation mechanisms or what have you. If we can say that, then it kind of offsets the damage that we're doing on from a carbon emissions and the speeding issue to say we're actually using that money to do good when bad things are happening, I guess is the best way of putting it. So I'll leave that with you, and I look forward to hearing more about the framework. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I have one further question following up on the previous councillor's comments about focusing in on addressing the 3 most pressing areas. I would like everyone to note that the 8 community zones are all school zones. Every single one of the 8 community zones that we are targeting and that have been identified are school zones. So I would be greatly dismayed if there are drivers going through school zones who are not looking at their speedometer and who are not aware of the speed that they are going. So this is about changing behaviors. And if it affects people in their pocketbooks, then maybe that will be what is necessary to change the behavior that is required. And I would also like to ask General Manager Molinari, so the 8 community zones are all school zones, and so how are we selecting, even amongst those 3 that are identified as above the 85th percentile, is it going to be rotating, or are these going to be permanent places that are identified, or is there a rotating schedule for these cameras?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we haven't finalized the proposal for that at this point, but what we're thinking is, putting these in for a very short period of time or rotating through all may not give you the long-term impact of each location. So our intent is to put them in. We originally were thinking 1 location, but 2 locations gives you a little bit better analysis and data. So we were thinking 2, 3. If that's council's desire, we're happy to do that. But if we move them around too much, what our concern is that will not give us the data for long-term implementation of this program. So driver behavior is really determined over time, and so if we leave them in a spot for a period of 1 or 2 years, we'll see the impact of and how long that positive impact lasts for, or whether it's short-lived. So I think we're going to learn a lot about driver behavior and how these work in our communities over the next 2 years if we proceed with the pilot. And then I think at the end of the pilot, we can, from our lessons learned, we'll be able to put a pretty significant program through with some good data and know what those outcomes will likely be in all the community safety zones in town. So, we could have some that are permanent locations and maybe have a camera that rotates through some of the lesser used areas. But the intent is, for the permanent program to capture all of those community safety zones and make sure that we're providing some sort of benefit in each of them.
Thank you very much, General Manager Molinari. Are there any other questions before we take a vote? Yes, Councillor Roy Clemente.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Molinari. How do community safety zones get established? It was my understanding that the province only allows us to designate them in school zones.
Through you, Madam Chair. So there's a couple different places. Community safety zones can be in school zones, or they could be in areas where there are parks or seniors' residents. There's a couple of different locations where that can be, but the entire town cannot be a community safety zone. So you have to find specific areas that meets the criteria, and then we would target those. So there's potential. As part of the pilot, we're looking just at the school zones. There's potential to expand this beyond that in the future, but that would be something that we would come back as part of a more permanent program of where we'd like these things to go.
So we haven't established community safety zones around specific parks, for example?
We have, through you, Madam Chair, we have established them in all of our school zones, and sometimes we've extended the school zone to include parks. I'm not certain if we've actually just done a park on its own. We may have. I'm not certain on that, but we can let you know if we have.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Any other questions before we take the vote? Okay, and all those in favor of accepting the memorandum? Very good. The motion carries unanimously. And General Manager Molinari, do you have any other comments or before we wrap up?
Thank you. No, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
And any other questions from council members? Yes, Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, I think certainly in our ward, Madam Chair, we've been getting a few inquiries from residents about downtown revitalization and where it's at, which is good. It means that the residents are engaged and they're anxious. And I was hoping, Mr. Molinari, you could tell us where we're at with that. And I know there's been some slowdowns with our friends at the utility companies, but perhaps if you could give us a quick update, I would appreciate it.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. So we actually have 2 update reports coming to the next council meeting on the 2 revitalization projects that will provide a fairly good update in terms of where we are at present time. But in a nutshell, our designs are nearing completion. And it's time for we sufficiently advanced for the utilities to start relocating their plant so that our civil works can come on the heels of that. So over the next few months, we'll be looking to see some of that utility work happening on both those projects, and then on the heels of that, the construction will commence. So. Our update at the next council meeting will provide be a little more fulsome than that, but that's essentially where we are at this point, and we'll certainly make sure that we provide an update that provides the information that you can use to provide to residents.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you, General Manager Molinari. Okay, and with that, we will proceed on to, we'll hand it back to the chair for the next item on the agenda.
Thank you. We're on item K, which is legal and legislative services, with Mayor Hackson in the chair, and since I'm stepping in, I will chair this portion. We have one item on the agenda, and that is Legal and Legislative Services Report LS 2024-05, which is our 2025 council meeting schedule. Mr. Valchich or Madam Clerk, or who would like to take this one?
Through you, Madam Chair, the purpose of this report is to obtain council's endorsement, of the 2025 council meeting schedule and the proposed dates for the 2026 business plan and budget deliberation, which is attached to the report. The adoption of this particular meeting schedule is a routine annual item for council as it sets the meeting schedule for the following year. One particular area with the report that's a bit new is as a result of a request from council members, and that's specific to the special council meetings and workshops. For 2025, staff are recommending the introduction of a workshop topic list to be provided to council biannually alongside the outstanding items list that we will be reporting. This list will note upcoming workshop topics for the year as identified by various town departments and as requested by council. And we will be regularly updating the list to ensure that topics are identified. Essentially to allow flexibility of the priority items, council requests, as well as presentation by external parties or changing legislation. Dates will not be tied to those workshop topic lists. Rather, we will be placing the following month's workshop date on the second committee of the whole agenda of the month and confirm the topic at that said meeting. For that reason, all of the special council meeting and workshops are going to be identified as placeholders, and they will be confirmed at those meetings. This essentially concludes the high-level overview of the report, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments with respect to the report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions or comments? Councillor Carruthers, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that's put into putting this together. My question is around the September 3rd Committee of the Whole and Council meetings. September 3rd is obviously a good time to meet and get started on our fall schedule. However, we all know in this room the amount of work that's put into pulling an agenda together, getting the reports ready, and for council reading them, asking questions, and preparing for that meeting. Now, knowing that that is the Labor Day long weekend and the week before that is the last week of the summer, a lot of families, including our staff, are enjoying their last week of summer holidays, getting kids off to school, getting kids off to university. I just think that we're putting a lot of pressure on our staff at a very, very busy time of year to have a meeting immediately after Labor Day weekend. And so I'm wondering if September, if we can push all the meetings by 1 week, and that would allow more flexibility for our staff to pull together the agenda and for council to have time that's not over the long weekend to read the agenda and formulate our questions.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate the comment, Councillor Carruthers. I'm just reviewing the dates against our multi-faith calendar, and by pushing the meetings by a week, that would result in holding a meeting during the week of Rosh Hashanah, which starts from September 22nd, I believe, and concludes on the 24th on our multi-faith calendar. There are variable options if council would want to consider. It's either we would hold that meeting on that date, or if that's not the appetite, council could consider moving the September 3rd meeting to the 4th to allow for an additional date, or alternatively, we could consider canceling the entirety of the first meeting date and start with a cycle on the 10th. Just bearing in mind that there's a couple of different conflicting meetings, including York Region Committee of the Whole taking place on the week of the 11th, and the multi-faith conflicts.
Thank you for those options. I'm also wondering about maybe getting rid of the council workshop on the 10th. We often cancel workshops when there's not enough topics, or even flipping them, so that we start with the council workshop, which is usually prep for one department, not all departments, and less prep for councillors. So if we flip those two, then have a full meeting on the 10th, but just council workshop on the 3rd. And then we'll leave it up to staff to choose who's on the hot seat for that one, who doesn't have last week of the summer plans.
Members of committee, any comments or suggestions or concerns about doing the flip for September? I know for personally, it's always been a bit of a scramble, but I've made it work and I was thankful for the Wednesday and not the Tuesday. But I think if we were to flip it and have the workshop at the 1st and then have our committee of the whole and council on the 10th, that might actually be a good option for us. Other feedback from members of committee? I'm hearing some murmurs of nodding and positivity, so we'll.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
I'm content with the flip.
Okay. All right.
Probably the best option.
Okay, Councillor Leahy, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to?
It wasn't
Ask a
with regard
question?
to the actual dates, it was with regard to the process that was referred to, that you are going to put placeholders in for upcoming special council education workshops. And what is the process that councillors should follow? Who do we submit our suggestions to for topics of educational workshops so that they will be considered for an appropriate place in the agenda?
Go ahead. Yep.
Madam Chair, those topics generally are arrived at through the various council deliberations and council itself suggesting, hey, it would be interesting to have a little bit more information on parking, or whether it be development process, or whatever the subject matter might be. So I would think, rather than individual council members providing to staff suggestions on workshop topics, it would be something better discussed by committee and council itself. And as you come up with topics that you think would assist you in your deliberations, in your sort of decision-making around specific types of subject matter reports, they're really there for the benefit of yourselves, as well as for the general public, quite frankly, where there's subjects that you believe the public would benefit from additional information in a more detailed manner through those workshops. So from a scheduling point of view, I think what's important is that those placeholders be established. And what we have found historically is it tends to go in ebbs and flows. Sometimes there's a need for education-style sessions. Sometimes those are public, and sometimes they can also be in camera if they're specific to just the education purposes of council. So we have kind of a variety. And then the odd time, if we find that there isn't a current need, then the schedule can be changed, those can be canceled if needed. But I think what's most important is they be in the calendar, and then as the year proceeds and as you identify areas that you think would be helpful to either yourself or to the general public, then council can determine and direct staff accordingly on what you'd like us to come back with.
So the short answer is you would like suggestions for topics brought up in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have one last question, speaking on the topic of special council workshops. So we have one planned for October 16th, I believe it is, coming up after Thanksgiving. And what is the topic of that special council education workshop?
Through you, Madam Chair, as it currently stands, I believe the expected topics will be fire services update as well as the Health and Active Living Plaza project status update.
Thank you.
I've had a comment from the live stream come through that our mayor and council golf tournament is on September 9th, which is the day before that suggested meeting. Does that pose a problem for staff who are attending that or for members of council who are also in attendance? We're still good with that? It's a new thing. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks. I just had two more comments. One, I really appreciate the budget, business plan and budget deliberations being more spaced out. And traditionally, we've had them on either side of a council meeting, and it ends up being a lot of prep that we're trying to get done in preparation for 3 straight days of meetings. So I like this much better. And then my other comment was just on the conference schedule. I'm wondering if we just keep using the same conference schedule, and does anyone actually go to these conferences? I know some of them council attends. I'm not sure from a staff side, so I just don't want staff to continually be putting together a conference list if it's not really relevant to our schedule. So my question is just, some of them are just workshops. Are these things that staff are actually attending?
Mr. Valchich, would you happen to know, or Ms. Gandhi, from a training perspective?
Through you, Madam Chair, these workshops mostly staff do attend, so things like the Association of Municipalities of Ontario or OMAA, either the CAO or members of council or a combination thereof attend. There are many more conferences that are out there, but these are the general ones that we do attend.
So with OMAA, in my 6 years on council, I've never heard about it or been invited, so I don't think it's council that's attending that. But if council is meant to attend, it would be nice to get some more information on that. Thank you.
I think that's one that Mr. Valchich goes to. Okay. I had 2 comments. One, we've got a gap between December 17th and January 21st, it seems like, and I know in the past it has felt like a big gap. Realizing that we want to make sure that people have the ability to prepare agendas and so on before the end of the year holidays, but that does seem like a bit of a gap. Is that, are staff okay with that? Committee okay with that? There's a workshop on the 14th, okay. The other question I had, Madam Clerk, through you to staff, the multi-faith and cultural calendar has been mentioned and used to prepare this calendar. There are some spots on that chart that says that there may need to be accommodations for staff. Do we have staff who can cover for someone who needs to be away because they have a family or a religious celebration that they wish to observe? I don't want us to be simply going ahead and approving this without being considerate that there may actually be staff who need the time away. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So there are dates of significance, like particular significance. Rosh Hashanah was mentioned. So in those dates, we try to avoid meetings altogether because that might prevent staff and residents from attending and participating in those meetings because they're observing those holidays. For the other holidays, then yes, we absolutely do ensure that there are individuals who can attend in lieu of staff being able to observe the holidays that they observe.
Thank you. I did also want to mention, having grown up in Quebec, that Saint Jean Baptiste is not a religious holiday, it's a cultural holiday. So, I know it's named after a saint, but it's cultural. Anyway, so I do not have a motion on the table. May I have a motion moved by Councillor Crone that we are going to adopt the schedule as amended, making that change in September? Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. I don't see any items under administration, finance, fire and emergency services. The general managers of those areas, do you have anything that you want to raise? Members of committee, anything you need to raise under those areas? Okay, I'm going to move on to other business, and there's none at this time. And we're now at adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Leahy, that we adjourn at 11:25 a.m. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you.